Well, good morning, everyone. Glad to see everybody here. And I'm Les Engel. I'm extending a warm welcome from AMFA, CMMA, and also Tri-State. Those are the three groups that are part of MMA. So we appreciate you taking time for your schedule to join us today. Our goal is to provide content that specifically helps manufacturers. So today we welcome you to session 9 of our marketing series, featuring a discussion on platform options for digital prospecting, presented by Luke Riordan and Seth Johnson from DAYTA Marketing. So DAYTA Marketing is an innovative marketing agency providing enterprise-level marketing services to small and medium-sized businesses. So Luke Riordan is the founder and CEO of DAYTA Marketing. Luke leads the DAYTA team by example, modeling their values through his vision, mentorship, constant pursuit of knowledge, growth, and genuine investment in each and every client. Seth is one of DAYTA's rock star account developers. Seth started his career as a reporter for a small newspaper and quickly transitioned to print advertising sales. Soon after, he found himself in the realm of digital marketing. So with that, I want to welcome Luke and Seth, and they can explain how this works to you.
All right. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. And good. We got a good group here, 20, and I'm sure others will join as we're going through. But again, thanks for having us. I am I've been a part of the CMMA for a few years now, and then a member, DAYTA has been a member of, I should say, and then I have been a part of the marketing committee as well. So getting more and more familiar with the CMMA, the members, the manufacturing members, and then the non-manufacturing members as well that all help to help support manufacturing together. So thank you again for the introduction. Got a little bit into that. And then Seth, do you want to provide an intro for yourself too?
Yeah, Lester did a nice job there. I'm Seth, I'm an account developer. So I spend about half my time working with our existing clients on strategy, coming up, with ways to reduce marketing waste, make our marketing strategies more effective, and the other half of my time with new folks and doing things like this and bringing people on board with DAYTA. Cool. So at DAYTA, it's our responsibility to defend and grow your brand's competitive advantage. Like Lester said, we're an innovative marketing agency that provides enterprise-level marketing services to small and medium-sized businesses. We want to develop proactive client partnerships and deliver proven results. So why, right? Why do we do what we do? Why are we needed in the marketplace? It's because in the 1700s, marketing was pretty easy, right? Like you had a newspaper and a printing press, so that's cool. And then a bunch of stuff started to happen, right? Like radio, direct mail, magazines, TV, billboards, and then something called the internet happened. And now we have Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, Bing, Google, programmatic, geofencing, email, and all of the things that I mentioned earlier, the traditional media, are all very relevant today. So there's basically more ways than ever right now to waste money on marketing. And if you're trying to run an effective business as a business owner and juggle the marketing, that is really, really challenging. So today we hope to help you cut through at least some of that mess that's out there and make your marketing more efficient and effective.
Okay, so Amy mentioned this right away. We're going to be giving out, this is the first of 3 gift cards that are available. Please check out the question that we're asking on the screen, and it's first person to chat us. The answer is going to win the first gift card here. So please submit your chat and your answer. What is your biggest challenge stemming from marketing complexity? Video, too many platforms. All right, so we'll be following up afterwards with those gift cards as well. But thanks for some of those early answers that came in. Watch out for the next questions they're going to be coming throughout the presentation. I jokingly said have your hands hovering over the keyboard for the next 45 minutes. That's the way to win this thing. So appreciate the answers as well. As Seth mentioned, there are a lot of complexity here in marketing. And so we want to dive into some of that today and hopefully simplify it and make this as understandable and and relatable to you as well as we go through. So Seth, on to some of those specific marketing or manufacturing marketing challenges.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I just want to say we love working with manufacturers because most of the time you're in complex situations that require what I call creative marketing solutions. By that, I mean, you're not doing roofing. So there's more complexity there. I mean, you might be like a smaller niche manufacturer, and to get your foot in the door with a much larger business than you might be your best step forward, right? And you're probably going up against competitors that are also much larger than you. They might offer more products. What we found is even if you manage to get a glance from a larger business like that, you need to at least look the part to compete, or chances are you're going to get steamrolled by a bigger name with a stronger image. On the flip side, right, some of you are industry leaders with big networks of distributors and in this case, let's say retailers. Your challenge is probably completely different, right? Like your biggest opportunity for growth might not be getting in with new retailers or distributors. It might be, making sure that those businesses have the tools that they need to promote and sell your products more effectively, right? So marketing the manufacturing space is interesting because oftentimes, not only do you need to influence your buyer, you also need to influence your buyer's buyer. So, I mean, we look at it as, a two-layer approach. Do you have a two-layer approach to marketing? Do your retailers have the tools and technology they need to sell your products? How about a co-op program? Do you have a co-op program? And do you have a way to target both the buyers and the end customer? And then, maybe there are some of you that, oh, hey, Seth, right? I have a B2B product, but the end user is the business I'm selling it to, right? And that's nice because that's a really defined audience. But do you have a list of businesses that could use your product? And if you have that list, do you have a plan to market only to those businesses? And does your sales team have the capability to directly outreach to those decision makers at those businesses in multiple different ways? So I mentioned developing, a reputable brand earlier when I was talking about kind of this David and Goliath scenario. We know that image, reputation, brand are all really important to manufacturing. And that's something that we work with our clients on every day. But because we're limited by time, this presentation is going to really focus more on targeting, right? And using those real, tangible prospect lists with names and contact information to reach out to new businesses.
Exactly. And what Seth just described this is how we're going to cover the topic of targeting through these 4 main topics here. You're going to see these 4 throughout the rest of the presentation. They're going to shift down to the bottom left of the slide so you can follow along to see exactly where we're at. And we're going to start with defining your customer here. And it, of course, is all going to lead back to digital prospecting, but we're going to talk about other ways to prospect as well, such as getting this data that we're going to be discussing about, the DATA data, and get that into your system, but then also be able to use it for things like direct mail, outbound phone calls, etc. So it's really merging the marketing and the sales efforts together here. So next we'll dive in here to defining the customer. So when it comes to defining your customer, the best place to start is on your existing customers. And it's not all of your customers, right? I can speak from example on this one. We're heading into our 10th year now. It'll be next spring as a business owner. And I've lived the struggles of having, not the best clients. And not all clients are created equal. And some customers are just better customers than others. And so I'm sure, many of you have similar situations where you can think about a customer who's been a time suck, or certain traits of a customer who they're not a good fit for whatever reason it might be. It just doesn't fit with your business model or your value proposition. So it's really important to think through and identify who is the best customer for where your business is heading. And it might be a segment of your current customer base. If it's all of your customers, great. You're at a nice spot, but it might be a segment to think about. And so it's a great spot to start when it comes to this. But there's some other factors listed on the screen here. I'm not going to walk through each one, but a couple other segments that we're going to discuss that might make sense for you that we have the ability to target now. And everybody has this ability too, to go after is things like company size, number of employees, location, whether it's by zip code or by state. These are all things that we can leverage, and then some of the others that are listed on the screen there, such as SIC codes, and then the classic phone, email, contact information. So with that, Seth?
Mm-hmm.
So on the creating your audience, this is where we're going to, again, talk about the best place to start, which is owning your data. There's a lot that's changing. There's some regulation that's come out recently that we're going to get into later. But owning your data is the number one thing that you need to do. If you don't have a CRM, or you're not tracking, or you don't have a spreadsheet at least, where you're not logging emails, phone numbers of your customer, you got to start now. That's kind of the basics of. Hopefully everybody's doing some version of that and continues to collect that data. The asterisks there next to some of these points that we're talking about do have privacy concerns that are surfacing, like I mentioned, and you've got to be logging where you acquired that information from, and it's going to become more and more important down the road. And then the other option that you have in creating these targeted lists are purchasing or licensing these lists from brokers is one option, or first-party providers. An example of broker would be a company like DAYTA Marketing, who can go out and find lists. And then a first-party provider in the manufacturing industry might be somebody like ThomasNet, with many of you I'm sure are familiar with. They have some marketing services as well, but they provide that data as well that they gather on their site that you can purchase or leverage by working with them on. So a lot of different routes. There's probably different industries that you can tap into, or different associations that you can tap into, even outside of the CMMA. There are tons of options for gathering data. Reason why we almost always recommend going with a broker is because they are agnostic in how they go about making the decision. I mean, they should be agnostic about how they go about making the right purchase or recommendation for which list that you should buy. And they're not just selling their own data, because often they're double dipping, meaning that they're selling you the data and then also selling you the marketing that goes along with it to market to their data. So they've got an incentive in order to sell their own. And then I mentioned a little bit already, but the rented options that you have in order to purchase. But first and foremost, you have to have a way to log, to compile, and store that data in your own CRM, or even if it's a spreadsheet, you got to start somewhere with it. And so those are some points that we wanted to go over on the creating your list. And then this is where we want to show a little bit of an example of what this looks like, because this can start to get a little bit out there, maybe sounds a little bit like smoke and mirrors. But one of the things that we wanted to talk about today is how we actually put this to use. And we gathered a list of manufacturers here using a data provider that we have called Netwise. And so we can actually go in, and I mentioned some of those filters earlier, such as contact name, company size, email, company name. You can see the titles of the individuals there, phone numbers. And so we'll actually use this data in order to call on and then also market to individuals. You can see the number of employees at these organizations, the amount of revenue that they're doing. So it's extremely valuable. This is accessible as well. It's not just information that we have that nobody else can access. You just have to do your homework and how to find out the right data. So with that, Seth, anything actually you want to, before we move on, talk about there with that Netwise data?
No, I just want to say it's I mean, it's interesting. Like we use that list that we were showing you just now to reach out to people to join us for this event. And we actually had people reach out to us who we had had no contact with before, as a result of that. So, I mean, that's ultimately what we're after, and that what we'd be after for you too.
So it really starts with that, like the foundation, that list, creating it. That's really where we're focused on right now in the point of the presentation. And we're going to get into, so some of those pain points that were brought up in the chat were, well, there's so many channels. How do you attack that list? What do you do next? So that's what we're going to start getting into here in the presentation. And before we dive into some of the tactics, it's critical that we're thinking through all the triggers along the way, because it doesn't make sense for us to have that list and then just start blanketing them with marketing messages about our company's value proposition or your value proposition as a manufacturer, and where they're going to, maybe you can help support them in terms of speed. That might be your value proposition, but you got to really map out what their journey looks like and what triggers that they're going to go through or when researching your organization. So got some of the bullet points there on the screen are critical for us to consider when understanding the journey and mapping it out. That HBR article that is in the yellow box there is really a smart approach to some of the struggles that customers are having. A lot of times we hear from the sales and marketing teams at manufacturers that they're all about speed, being there. They're really focused on the relationships that they have with the people and answering questions and providing them the information that they need. Well, what we're finding and what this HBR article gets into is that it's more about being proactive and not being responsive. And providing and helping them, guide them through that process and giving them the information before they even ask for it, that is driving a sale faster than before. And it's also making their purchasing easier as well. That's what this is all about. Mapping this journey out is all about making that buyer's journey for them easier, because they have all the information. As you can see, on the internet, you probably know this yourself if you're in sales, that your potential customers are armed with more information than ever before. They've got all the tools, all the potential solutions. As far as RFPs go, they're probably getting more accurate than ever before in terms of what they need, but they still might be providing RFPs that miss the point or are a little bit off. What we're seeing more and more in successful sales and marketing organizations is that they're challenging those RFPs to say with insights along the way. And so that's what this slide really gets at here is they got to understand and map out that journey. We're going to show you how we recommend doing it with these 6 stages. And so you'll see this in many different formats. HubSpot covers this with their sales funnel. It's a traditional sales funnel is covered by many different organizations as well in terms of how to go about your digital prospecting. But it's always been advised anywhere from 5 to 10 stages are mapped out on your customer journey mapping. At DAYTA, we leverage a 6-stage framework that you can see here. And today, for the sake of time, we're going to focus on 1 through 3, which is awareness, research, and comparison. And we're going to give an example, and Seth and I will just riff off each other here, go back and forth a bit, of one of our clients out in Fargo, North Dakota. They're called Spectrum Aeromed. They are a specialty manufacturer for medical equipment for helicopters and airplanes. So let's say that I'm a hospital medevac center, employee, somebody who's representing the hospital, and they're burdened with COVID-19 right now, and suddenly their medical flights are fraught with personal space issues, right? There's not a lot of room on a helicopter, and maintaining a 6-foot distance is a challenge. So, right there's the problem that our client is faced with.
Sure. So, I mean, once if again, I am that hospital medevac center, right? Once I become aware that I have this problem of space and a helicopter, my next step is going to be to look into options. And that's when I'm pushed into what we call the research stage, right? So what am I doing? I might be talking to peers, it's probably a pretty small community of us, at the different hospitals that do what we do. I might be hopping online, looking at different websites, looking into what's out there, what answers there are to fix my problem. Those are the stages I'm going through when I'm in research. And that's when I move into comparison.
Yep. So once you're in comparison stage and looking for a solution here to the problem, you might have narrowed it down, from the research stage to say, 2 to 3 or more distributors who offer this type of isolation units specifically for aircraft, right? So you got done asking your peers who they recommend or other resources that you have that you want to tap into, and you're leveraging their experience. So at this point, you've narrowed it down a bit, and you're interested in moving into that choice stage.
Sure. And then now, if I'm in the choice stage, I am in communication with a company like Spectrum AirMed, maybe another one. I'd consider myself in their sales process, right, where I'm learning from them firsthand about the product. And then we talk about, what it's going to take for me to make that buying decision, right, to make that choice to choose Spectrum AirMed. And now once I've made that choice, I move into the next stage.
Yep. So once you made the purchase, there's that, you want to avoid, of course, as a marketer, buyer's remorse. You're evaluating the purchase that you made, if you're the buyer in this case, and you've purchased those isolation units for medical flights. And now you're hearing from staff right at this point. So your staff who you made the purchases for, do they work, right? Were the promises that were made to you back in the choice stage or the comparison stage when you're thinking about options here, were the promises that salesperson mentioned, did they actually come true, right? Did it work or not? And for your sake, as the buyer, you're really hoping it is, because you've made the decision on the behalf of others. So you're evaluating, did I make the right choice or not? And everybody does this no matter what they're purchasing.
And then finally, the end goal of this whole marketing ecosystem that you want to create, advocacy, right? The Holy Grail, where you have, let's say again, I am the hospital medevac center who made this purchase from Spectrum AirMed, am actively telling my peers about my experience, with Spectrum. I might be writing like a review online. I might be, actually, instead of waiting for somebody to ask me, I might lead with it. Hey, other hospital medevac center, do you have a solution for this? Well, I found this awesome thing here. You should do it too. So that's what we talk about when we talk about advocacy. We also find that most of the time, all of our best customers come from advocacy. It tends to be the fastest way through the entire loop, the whole sales process, and they tend to become advocates, more often than others who don't come to you through the advocacy, through advocacy. So, if you're, we're mostly going to talk about awareness, research, comparison in this, but if your marketing plan doesn't have a strong focus on advocacy, really consider that. And consider putting some emphasis there.
And one other thing before we move on here, that it's critical to map this out, because it changes rapidly. And if 2020 taught us anything, we know that's true, that this landscape, this decision-making process does change and evolve. And what we're doing at each stage, as you heard Seth and I kind of go through that example, is as marketers, we need to be thinking, how can we influence this? And how can we be proactive, and so that we can move that person through that process faster? So another option, another chance. This time we're looking for a right answer, not only speed, but you've also got to be right. So check out that question. Which 2 ad platforms dominate the digital marketing landscape? There's 2 major ones. Go ahead and use that chat.
Oh, I want to give a shout out to the first winner, to Luke and Seth. It was Pam from St. Cloud Winners on the St. Cloud Windows on the last question.
Awesome.
I see Pam was the first one this time, but not quite right. And it looks like Simone from TO Plastics might be the first correct answer this time.
Perfect. Seth, you want to go to the next slide? There's a
Yeah.
pop over. There we go. So that's right. It is Facebook and Google. You can see that Amazon is starting to come into the mix here, but it is very much so a duopoly situation that we experience as marketers when it comes to digital marketing. And so I mentioned on the last slide, this landscape changes quickly, but so one of the ways to think about it is what are the big players because it is evolving fast. And often the other thing I saw was a challenge of small teams, right? We run into that all the time. Our clients are challenged by a proliferation of platforms, like tons of them. And then there's one or two people who are tasked with managing the marketing. And it just, we've got a lot of sympathy for them at DAYTA, because we know it takes a team approach here, and the landscape is changing quickly. And so, and your prospects are also changing, demographics, behaviors. But the two platforms to focus on, and why we bring this up, is that they cover the vast majority of targets. We've got a wide range of different manufacturers and organizations that are joining us today. But Facebook and Google, they not only are the largest, but they're also largely the most sophisticated too when it comes to the platforms. And these platforms also allow us to take some of that data that we showed and actually upload our own data onto those platforms, and so, or upload our list onto that platform. And they do allow you, of course, to target some of those things that we talked about earlier, such as company size, titles. Those filters are available, but they're more limited, and they're also controlled by Facebook and Google largely. And you'll never get a list like what Seth and I showed you, where you actually have the names of the individuals, the titles, their phone numbers. It's always what's called hash data, or information that you just know you're targeting people with these titles, and they fit these certain demographics. So you can hopefully see the difference in what we're trying then the picture we're trying to paint, and why it's important to own your own data versus just having this duopoly and being at their basically their mercy in many cases for what we can do in terms of marketing. There are many other channels out there that we can play around with and try. They're less sophisticated. We often find that as you move away from Facebook and Google, the cost moves up, and then the attribution, so being able to tie a campaign back to the actual results becomes harder and harder. And so that's why we want to set the stage a little bit with the landscape here that we're within.
Sure. So let's talk about some of those options. We'll start with Facebook. So if any of you have tried to do B2B marketing and you've tried to advertise, like awareness level advertising on Facebook, and again, you're specifically looking for other businesses, not like end user, people who might end up buying like a consumer product. If you're specifically looking for businesses, it's probably ended in at least some level of disappointment. And that's because Facebook just doesn't let you get targeted enough to market or to advertise for a lot of the products that you sell. And we also know that, like, let's just say 4 years ago, there were a lot more robust targeting options through Facebook. And the trend just in general in marketing has been to reel back how targeted they'll let you be. And a lot of that just has to do with like privacy concerns and stuff. So the more data that you can bring to the table and that you can hand over to Facebook to fuel your campaigns, the more effective it can be. If you take a list, with names, emails, phone numbers, information like we showed you earlier, you can upload that to Facebook. And now you have your own audience. And then you add in your own customer list that you own, and now you have, more people you can add to that list. So, I mean, that's on the front end. So, I mean, you can absolutely use Facebook effectively in a B2B space if you can get targeted enough. And that starts with a list. We also do, another thing you could consider, and you probably, many of you have done, is retargeting, right? Someone's been on your website, stay in front of them. That's gold. Somebody's interested in what you offer. So staying in front of them is awesome. We can also, the other thing you can do is run, say, like animated video ads on Facebook and retarget people who have engaged with those. It's just another way to get a level deeper when it comes to targeting.
Yeah, Seth, just to add on to that, the video piece, one of my favorite things is you can actually target a segment of people who on Facebook who watch a certain amount of the video. And so that the next ad that you show is only going to people who have watched, call it 10 seconds of that video. And so when we say Facebook is more sophisticated than other platforms, that's an example of how sophisticated it can get and how smart you can get with your marketing, and why it's so important to map out the customer journey. So, well, if they watch these 10 seconds or 15 seconds of this video, I want to show them the next message because I know this is how my potential customer thinks. And this is how I can be proactive with my marketing. So Google here, it's got another way to upload lists as well. There's one catch, and it comes in the form of a $50,000 catch. But if you've spent over a lifetime using Google, $50,000 over your lifetime spend there, you can leverage this custom list upload. So it could be $10,000 a year for 5 years, right? That's going to allow you to be able to access and dive in. And the account needs to be over 90 days old. So, those are some of the requirements in order to use that tool. But the three main ways to leverage Google are through search, display, and video, YouTube being one of their biggest media sources that they leverage. And of course, remarketing is available on Google as well, meaning somebody goes to your site and you want to stay in front of them. Many of you as manufacturers have remarketing makes a lot of sense for, and I know Seth is a huge advocate of, as am I. It's a very inexpensive way to stay in front of somebody who's been to your site, and why wouldn't you want to continue to stay in front of them there? So Google's a great tool for that. But then moving on to our first platform that we're going to spend a little bit extra time on outside of the duopoly is LinkedIn. And LinkedIn here, really the key thing with LinkedIn to know is that compared to Facebook and Google, you get ready to spend a little bit more if you're just using LinkedIn. Here in talking to our team, what we typically recommend is a minimum budget of $1,500 per month. It can go lower than that, if you want to test it out, of course. But it makes sense to, if you're gonna really leverage a platform, you want to be thinking about it in terms of spending at least $1,500 per month in order to get the best bang for your buck. The CPM is just higher, meaning that you're going to pay more in order to reach 1,000 people as compared to Google and Facebook. The reason why is because LinkedIn has some of the targeting demographic information that Google and Facebook just fall a little bit more short on when it comes to B2B contacts. And so they're running ads now, even promoting their platform, saying LinkedIn is where business gets done. And the people often go there to do business on LinkedIn. Whereas with Facebook and Google, sometimes your ad is going to show up right behind like a picture of a pug dressed up as like some other animal or looking silly. And then like your friend who went on vacation recently, so LinkedIn's pitch is it's all business, right? You're going to pay a little bit more, but it's worth it. So something to consider when looking at LinkedIn as a potential platform to use.
I think that was a good summary, Luke. LinkedIn's it's just more expensive.
Yeah.
So be ready for it. So what if we leave, Google, Facebook, LinkedIn, what are some of the things that you can do more directly? Again, thinking about that, like a list, like the list we showed you last time. A few options for you. Email marketing. You can kind of split this into two categories too, right? There's mass emails that you can send out. And that falls more into that campaign bucket. And if you're gonna commit to a list, I highly recommend, email marketing for that. But the other thing that you can do too is, your sales team can go through that list, cherry pick it, and then come up with, a sales strategy around outreach to some of the people who are on that list, who we know are already getting your messaging through, let's say, Google, Facebook, LinkedIn, email. So it's kind of like we push this marketing wave over this list first, and then you can go in with this direct outreach, knowing that many people on this list have already been exposed to your brand, meaning they might be more receptive to your message. So it could be email marketing. We talked about LinkedIn. If any of you use Sales Navigator, it creates a great way to put more touch points out in front of these prospects. So, if I'm looking at a list like that, I'm going, all right, day one, send out a invite to connect on LinkedIn. By the way, that list has LinkedIn URLs for those contacts in there.
Yeah.
Invite to connect. Maybe day 4 you send an email. Maybe day 7 you make a phone call. Maybe day 9 you send a message to them through InMail, and then maybe you circle back to email again. It can be part of your prospecting process, and it makes it a lot less repetitive than just like phone call, email. And then there's direct mail too. If you have that list and you're committed to thinking that like these are the ideal customers that we want to go after, it might be worth putting a little bit more money behind it and actually sending out a physical mailer. There are some other things you can do with direct mail too. Like if somebody's been on your site, you can actually do what we call postcard retargeting. So we can match, users up with addresses for where they might be and actually send them mailers. So there's some interesting ways that people are using direct mail right now that they maybe haven't in the past. And then of course, cold calling, pick up the phone, leave the voicemails, and make it part of the mix.
Yeah, the analogy one of our board members at DAYTA uses when it comes to really that resonates the most with this slide, I would say, is we've talked about some of these. It's a war analogy, but marketing, some of these ideas that we said, it's softening up the enemy with artillery, right, and shooting in the artillery rounds, and then as you move down and you get them farther down the customer journey and you've mapped that out, you're calling them right at the right moment. You're sending them a piece of mail that really speaks to them. And then you're sending them a personalized email. So that's why marketing and sales really need to work together here in order to track and drive success in sales ultimately. So, and then after the artillery has softened up the enemy, that the cold calling is sending in the infantry type thing. So it works with me, the analogy. So
I like that one.
So, okay, third and final one here, true or false, making it easy.
Oh, Pam is on the ball. She says false.
She took my advice and had her fingers hovering over and she
Pam from St. Cloud Window.
I feel like we should wait an extra like 5 seconds just so people can read it. So, Pam, you're on it, and you're also.
Sorry, I'm muted, but yeah, I took your advice.
That's awesome. I'm glad you did. So, Pam, you're right. It is false. If you've heard of GDPR and thought, well, it's only for EU-based companies or companies that are selling into the European Union, it does in fact impact you as a business, and it's coming. It's coming fast as well to the United States. But if you're an EU citizen living in the US these are things that we're thinking about as marketers. And we, as far as the legalities of it, we're kind of going after and trying to read through the legal jargon, going, okay, what does this mean for our clients? And really, we have some of those, we've got more details that we're going to share in a manufacturing toolkit as part of our follow-up here. But it does impact, and really the main takeaway here is own your data, right? You try to gather it, get it on your own as much as possible. Make sure you've got those opt-ins listed. You've got a privacy policy. So some of these bullet points here, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it, but it does impact you as a manufacturer in the United States. I was on a CMMA meeting a few weeks ago, or maybe it was a month ago now. But we talked about how many manufacturers are selling overseas. It wasn't a massive number, but it doesn't really matter when it comes to GDPR. So not to scare you, it's more to inform you that it does affect you. And so there's some tips for you. But Seth?
Cool. So we've talked about identifying, figuring out who the customer is, mapping out the customer journey. We know what we're trying to do with it. We've looked at our different platforms that we could use. So now we're at that point where how do we take what we have now and build it into a marketing strategy? So that's what we'll go through next. And we've found that the best way to do that is to go back to that customer journey. Okay, we don't want to speak with our marketing. We don't want to speak to somebody who's in that awareness stage the same way that we'd talk to somebody who's in the comparison stage, right? So, I mean, if we know our customers' struggles and what their story looks like before they even engage with us, we can be proactive about breaking down some of those obstacles for them before they run up against them. Right. So the awareness stage, again, they might not know who you are. All we're trying to do is tell them if they have a problem, right? That like there's a better way out there, and let them know who you are too, right? So here are some of the platforms we could use for that. Here are some of the tactics we could use for that. This is just an example of what a strategy might look like, and then on the research side, it's now somebody's actively looking for a problem that you can solve. So, what do they need to know, and how can we make sure that our solution is getting put in front of them when they're actively looking for it? And then we get into comparison. They have a few different options in front of them. How do we make sure that you are the one that stands out? Okay, this is like when we're selling your answer to their problem. And then we get into some of the platforms we'd use, like making sure that we have content built out around that on the website, social media. This is when remarketing, retargeting are huge, right? They've already seen your website. How can we make sure that that message is compelling enough to push them to choice?
I would say, an example here that I wanted to share might not be, perfect fit for every manufacturer, but the ones who provide prototypes, just to use an example, if prototyping is part of your sales process in order to close the deal, and that customer likely knows that they're going to need a prototype at some point in the sales process, why not move it up and be more proactive about it earlier on in the sales process with your marketing, and talk about that before, because they probably already thought it through themselves. So just an example. Again, it's not going to fit for everybody, but hitting people with answers to their questions and anticipating those through this process is something that we highly encourage.
Mm-hmm. So this kind of maps out the back end strategy, right? But what does the end product look like that the user sees, right? And that could look something like this. I mean, this is an oversimplified version of it, right? But this 1, 2, 3 is the exact same as this 1, 2, 3, awareness, research, comparison. Okay. So, I mean, one, awareness level, all we're doing is showing them that there's a better way out there, getting them familiar with our brand. 2, we're looking at search advertising, right? Somebody's actively looking to solve a problem that they have. Here's how we can put our message in front of them. Okay. And then 3, now they've interacted with our business, how can we stay in front of them and use a much stronger call to action, asking them to act than we did in kind of this awareness stage. So that's how we tie it all together. All right.
So any questions right off the bat?
All right, so I do have a question here, and if you also have more questions for DAYTA, please feel free to put those in the chat. So here's a question for you. We usually buy a list and send postcards. How will Google, Facebook, and LinkedIn help more with that?
I see it being complementary. I love the idea of sending postcards out to a list, right? It's creating more touch points. And like Luke was saying, kind of doing more to soften up the lines, right?
Yeah, it's taking that same list and uploading it. And so instead of, hoping that there's overlap with the list that you bought and who you're targeting on Facebook and Google, uploading a list directly onto the platform, and if it has a high match, so meaning that it finds their digital profiles and matches them, you're targeting the exact same people. It's not a guess. It's not a cross your fingers type thing. It's when they match and you're marketing to the same exact individual.
I mean, I've talked to some who will do are currently doing advertising on social media and Google, and they have a list that they're using these postcards and doing some emails for. But they don't know that you can upload that list and hit the same audience in 2 different ways. It should be kind of a no-brainer in that case.
Great, thank you. Another question here. You briefly mentioned retargeting. How does that work?
So retargeting would be if somebody has come to your site, your website, okay, and then they leave your site. And if you're talking about Facebook retargeting, if they're on Facebook, we can show them your ads, right? I mean, it's the same thing. Like if you go online and you're like shopping for a pair of jeans and you look at that pair of jeans and then you leave and you didn't buy them, and all you see for the next month is that pair of jeans. We want your business to be that pair of jeans.
We should make that our new tagline. That could be, yeah, that works. Yes, but that's great explanation. It's a great question. There's a lot of ways to do it as well too.
Thank you. Another question here in chat. Do you have recommendations for introductory content or messages as you're working to introduce yourself and your company, specifically to cold prospects?
So could you read that earlier part of that, Amy, again? What was you broke up a little bit for me.
Do you have recommendations for introductory content or messages as you're working to introduce yourself and your company to cold prospects?
Sure. Yeah. And I would say, and Seth, feel free to jump in on this too, but it goes back to that journey mapping, is understanding what problems is your potential customer facing right now. It's not so early on. They don't really care. They, as in the potential buyer, doesn't really care about your brand so much as they care about having their problem solved, or, maybe it's a fear of missing out, right? And they don't have the latest, coolest thing that they can shout about on their own. So they've got FOMO a bit. So you want to address their fears, address their pain points. I know I'm not getting very specific. It's kind of tough to get more specific than that. But it's about putting yourself in your potential customer's shoes and answering and addressing questions that they would have that relate to their fears, their pains that you might be able to solve.
The other thing I'd say with that too is I like the idea of you know, kind of leading by solving the problem. But I think it's also important to make sure that you have your unique value defined, right? Like, what value are you bringing to the market? How is that unique? And how can you state that in a way that's concise? I mean, then you can take that and that's something that can echo across your sales approach, your marketing approach into operations, and it creates a lot of continuity.
Yeah. Any other?
Here we go. Thank you. One more question here for you. Where's the best place to get a list?
So again, it's going to depend on who your potential customer is, but we always caution buying lists where you don't get it. I mean, you want to be able to get a, so here's some things to ask for. Ask for a sample. I would say there's a lot of places to get a list, right? So I want to start there. Ask for a sample so you can look at it, make sure you're actually getting the data that you hope for. But there's a lot of players out there. Like I mentioned ThomasNet in the presentation. I know they provide information. DAYTA Marketing provides information. Other agencies might as well. So you can talk to marketing agencies, associations, trades, if they're willing to provide their data. You know, make sure you understand though how to, and then so you get that list and then ask about how to use it. What's okay? How did they go about getting it? The information, because that's where it starts to get into GDPR, and you want to be careful about you know, the information that you're purchasing. So I'd say be cautious. Make sure that you're not just buying smoke and mirrors. You know, get actual data first before you make that full purchase, and they should be able to customize it to your needs as well along the way. So those are some of the things I would consider when thinking about purchasing a list.
Luke, I'll give you a suggestion on one of the lists that we have purchased in the past. As a custom window manufacturer, one of our key targets are architects. Architects are required to have an AIA license, American Institute of Architects. So that's a very targeted source. It's their license, that's where their licensure comes through. So we are very confident in getting a list that comes from that architectural association.
Great example, Pam. It's, you know, like you said, it's targeted, it's reputable. Yeah, that's a perfect example. I'd really be cautious of like, you know, just the random list. You don't really know much about them. You know, be careful of those.
We do have one more question here in chat. In the digital outreach, emails, social ads, etc., do you recommend sending them to personalized content, or is general relevant website content enough?
Seth, you want to take that one?
Yeah, maybe I just want to make sure. I mean, there's kind of two sides. There's like the marketing side. If you're doing some kind of like like email blast, that's going to have to be more general and broad. I mean, if you're doing personal outreach, it'd be nice if that could be more personalized. And if there's a way you can actually bring them value, let's say if it is an email, in that email. I'm not sure if I understood the question right.
I think it might be more along the lines of like industry specific. So, you know, architects, for example, you can just lean on what Pam mentioned earlier to create a landing page or something like that to make it more specific for architects. You know, that it's always going to be best, I would say, to make it more specific for them as possible. But I would say it's prioritizing how much spend are you going to put behind it and how much of a focus is it. If it's a one-time campaign that you just don't have a huge amount of budget for, and you know, maybe it's like, I can throw $2,000 at this for the next 3 months. I don't know how much time you want to spend. Do you want to spend a week writing up the content? Probably not. You know, for that, so I think it's thinking through some of those things. How well does it, if you're going to write industry specific content, how well does it align to a long-term potential segment for you to go after?
Thanks, Luke. That was helpful. That question came from me, Simone at Teal Plastics. And I kind of on top of that is, if you're going to be spending the dollars, is it important at that level, so at the prospecting level, to, I guess, kind of follow that personalization through to the content you're serving them from your website? Or is like the goal, I guess, just to get them engaged and then personalize from there? I guess it's kind of like, if you're spending the money, how much effort do you put in on the content, or are the dollars just to get the awareness?
So Andy, do you want to take a whack at this one? Are you able to jump in? I think Andy's our Director of Marketing and Communications at DAYTA. So she's probably best suited. I've got my own answer, but I'll shut up for now.
You know, I think it's whenever you can personalize anything, that is just so much better. So if you've already identified that you have a certain segment, a certain vertical that you're going after, then, you know, really having a landing page for them to look at that speaks to them, that speaks to their particular pain points. And also having communications that speak specifically to what they're dealing with and why they would come to you for answers.
Mm-hmm.
And I know I probably don't need to jump in, but I am going to jump in because I do make, this is Pam at St. Cloud Window. We have 2 key profiles that we market to. So we actually sell twice. We sell to the architects, so they put us in their spec. And then once a spec goes out for a building, then your general contractor goes out and buys all the stuff. So then we market to the general contractor too. And the messaging is very different. So I create different landing pages depending on my ad campaign. I've created landing pages like when we've participated recently in virtual trade shows. So when they're coming off of a virtual trade show into us, they see something different too.
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of agree with what Andy just said.
Great, thanks. Yeah, it's just a kind of, as a lean team, how do you use your dollars and your time best, and how do you, I guess, what combination is most effective? So thank you, that's very helpful.
Wonderful, thank you. Well, it looks like that's all the questions in the chat. Is there anybody else that would like to unmute and ask a question? This is a great conversation. All right. Well, I want to thank Seth and Luke for taking the time to share their expertise with us today. And I'd also like to extend gratitude to the audience for your continued support. This webinar has come to an end. The presenters will stay online for anyone that has additional questions. For those that are logging off, enjoy the remainder of your week. We'll see you again next month for the continuation of the marketing series.